Hollywood gave you one version of this woman. She is standing at the end of the bar in a low-cut dress, waiting for a man to rescue her or ruin her, whichever comes first. That image has appeared in 1,000 westerns. It is almost completely fictional. The real Madam of the American West did not wait for anything. She owned the bar and the building it was in. She had the sheriff's home address. She ran a business so sophisticated that the men who tried to regulate her were usually on her payroll by the end of the first month. These are 20 facts about Wild West madams that Hollywood never had the nerve to show you. And by the time this list is over, you will never look at a Western film the same way again. Picture the American frontier in the 1860s and the 1870s. Dusty main streets cutting through boom towns that appeared on no map 6 months earlier. Saloons with long wooden bars and oil lamps throwing amber light across men who had not slept indoors in 3 weeks. Horse-drawn carriages navigating mud and manure on streets that had no name yet. Storefronts with hand-painted signs advertising things that had not existed the previous season. Gold mining operations scattered across the Colorado hills. Men in canvas work clothes and broken boots swinging picks at ground that might make them rich or might kill them first. In that world, every institution was improvised. Every business was an experiment. And the women running the most profitable operations in those towns were doing something that no history book bothered to record in full. Until now. Fact 20. In Springfield, Illinois in the year 1865, a 19-year-old woman named Maddie Silks hung a sign outside her first parlor house. The sign said, "Men taken in and done for." She was not being poetic. She was advertising. Born around 1846, Maddie Silks is documented as the youngest madam on the American frontier at the time she opened that establishment. 19 years old, running a commercial operation, managing employees, keeping accounts, navigating local politics. In a year when the country was still burying its Civil War dead, a teenager in Illinois was building the infrastructure of an empire that would run for the next 6 decades. Hollywood has never once shown you a 19-year-old woman running the most profitable establishment in a frontier town. That is not an accident. It is editorial policy. Fact 19. By the time Maddie Silks arrived in Colorado, she had already understood something that would have taken a modern business school 3 semesters to teach. The customer does not come to you. You go to the customer. And then you position yourself so the customer comes to you anyway, downhill, which is considerably easier. Silks assembled a small group of girls she had recruited in Kansas City, fitted a stagecoach as a portable establishment, and followed the gold rush from camp to camp across the Colorado mountains. Her campsite placement was not random. She set up below town, always below. Her own documented explanation was that prospective patrons would more willingly walk down a mountainside than climb it. She was not following the gold rush. She was supplying it. There is a difference, and that difference is the entire story of her career. Fact 18. In 1893, a woman named Pearl DeVere arrived in Cripple Creek, Colorado, and within months had opened an establishment called the Old Homestead House. Most men in Cripple Creek were sleeping in shacks without running water. They were eating canned food out of tins and digging ore in 12-hour shifts. Pearl DeVere's establishment had electricity. It had indoor plumbing with marble wash basins. It had a telephone. It had furniture imported from the East Coast. And it had something that almost nothing else on the frontier had, a dress code enforced at the door. If you could not meet the standard of presentation she required, you were not permitted to enter. The man being turned away in the mud outside her front door was being evaluated against a standard set by a woman who had built something better than anything else in that town. She was not running a brothel. She was running the only building in Cripple Creek that required you to prove you were worth letting in. Fact 17. Maddie Silks dressed like money because money was her primary language. She wore custom-made gowns on the frontier at a time when most women in those towns were wearing homespun. Each gown was designed with 2 pockets. One pocket held her gold coins. The other held an ivory-handled pistol. She did not permit swearing inside her establishments. She did not permit smoking. Customers were treated with a formality and respect that would have looked out of place in any other building on that street. This was not sentiment. This was strategy. A business that ran on discretion required an atmosphere that could not be used as evidence. The most dangerous person in that parlor was the one who dressed the best and never raised her voice. Here is the detail nobody talks about. The rules she enforced inside her own walls were stricter than anything the local government attempted to enforce outside them. Fact 16. Maddie Silks split her profits 50-50 with the girls who worked for her. She provided room. She provided 2 meals daily. She provided full laundry service. The girls purchased their own clothing, which meant they had investment in their own presentation, which was another form of business logic. In this same era, a woman working as a laundress, a domestic servant, or a school teacher in legitimate employment earned $1.50 a week. Think about what that comparison means before you apply any other framework to this situation. Silks was not exploiting her workforce. She was offering the most competitive employment contract available to a woman on the frontier. That comparison makes polite society very uncomfortable, which is precisely why it does not appear in the textbooks. Fact 15. Every year, Maddie Silks traveled east to recruit. She found new girls, brought them back to Denver, and then she paraded them down the street. A deliberate public procession designed to signal fresh inventory to an existing customer base and attract new ones. The women were dressed well. The event was visible. The intent was marketing. She understood that a business in her industry had a natural attrition problem, and that the solution was not to ignore it, but to stage the renewal as a spectacle. She understood brand refresh before Madison Avenue invented the concept. The crazy part is, this is documented. City records, newspaper accounts, contemporary descriptions. She was not hiding any of this. She was advertising it. Fact 14. There is a moment in Denver city records that deserves to be read very slowly. A city council meeting failed to reach quorum. The reason recorded in official documents: too many councilmen had left the session early to attend the opening of a new establishment on Holiday Street. Municipal government was suspended because elected officials abandoned a policy meeting to attend a brothel opening. The madams of Denver's red light district did not just corrupt politicians in the conventional sense of exchanging payments for favorable votes. They disrupted the operational function of city government itself. She did not need a lobbyist. She needed a guest list, and she knew exactly whose name to put on it. Fact 13. Pearl DeVere was born Eliza Martin in October of 1859 in Evansville, Indiana. She arrived in Denver at age 17 in 1877 and told her family she had found work as a milliner. She changed her name completely. Pearl DeVere was not a stage name or a nickname. It was a replacement identity, constructed specifically to protect the woman behind it from a society that would have destroyed Eliza Martin the moment it learned what she was building. By the time she arrived in Cripple Creek in 1893, the original person had been entirely replaced by the operating identity. Dual identity was not dishonesty. It was the only available protection against a legal and social system that offered her no other kind. Think about what it cost to become someone else entirely, and then think about what it must have been worth. Fact 12. Pearl DeVere charged as much as $1,000 for her personal services at the old Homestead House. A ranch hand in Cripple Creek in that era earned roughly $25 a month. She charged more for a single encounter than most men working in that region earned in an entire season of labor. And they paid it. Men who had money, and in Cripple Creek in 1893, there was real money moving, paid it without hesitation, because what she had built was worth the price she named. Nobody writes that on the historical marker outside the old homestead house. The marker mentions the building. The building survives. The economics that built it are considered impolite to discuss. Fact 11. The formal law on the American frontier offered women in this industry essentially no protection. If a customer became violent, if a business dispute needed resolution, if a competitor encroached on territory, the sheriff was unlikely to be useful and was sometimes actively hostile. Madams solved this problem the same way they solved every other operational problem. They built their own system. Private security forces were maintained, with men chosen specifically for their size, their reputation, and their documented willingness to use force. High-end establishments ran internal justice processes, where violations were adjudicated within the house without involving law enforcement at any stage. The private system worked better than the official one. She did not trust the law to protect her business, so she built a better one. That is not lawlessness. That is infrastructure. Fact 10. The political infrastructure these women constructed was not incidental to their business. It was foundational. Madams funded local political campaigns. They paid sheriffs directly, not as a one-time transaction, but as an ongoing salary in many cases. They built sustained relationships with judges. Some controlled which other businesses could operate within their districts, functioning in practical terms as a parallel municipal authority on the streets they dominated. The man who was supposed to regulate her was writing her name in his ledger under income. From documented historical records. Not rumor, not inference. This is what the frontier actually looked like, stripped of the mythology Hollywood built over the top of it. Fact 9. Bell Cora operated one of the most prominent establishments in San Francisco in the 1850s, during the height of the city's gold rush expansion. Her husband, a gambler named Charles Cora, shot and killed United States Marshal William Richardson after a public dispute. Charles was arrested. He was tried. A vigilante committee, operating outside official legal channels, but with the full support of a significant portion of San Francisco's political class, executed him. Bell Cora watched the execution. Then she went back to work. She used her political connections, her accumulated wealth, and the institutional reputation she had spent years building to protect what she had constructed. History largely omitted her name from the record of this period. The building she operated in outlasted every man who tried to shut it down. She did not grieve publicly. She had a business to run. Fact 8. On Holiday Street in Denver, Maddie Silks had competition. Her primary rival was a woman named Jenny Rogers, documented as standing nearly 6 feet tall and rarely seen without her signature emerald earrings. Rogers built the House of Mirrors in 1889, a 3-story structure with 27 rooms, gilt mirrors across every wall, velvet curtains, and a level of interior design that had no precedent on that block. The money that funded the House of Mirrors, according to documented historical rumor, came from blackmail. The details of what Rogers held and over whom have never been fully established. She died in 1909 and is buried at Fairmount Cemetery in Denver, not under the name Jenny Rogers, under the name Leah Wood. Even in death, she kept the alias. Old habits. Fact 7. Dora Dufran was born Amy Helen Dorothea Bolshaw in Liverpool, England, on November 16, 1868. She immigrated to the United States as a child and settled in Deadwood, South Dakota, around age 15 during the gold rush. She and her husband eventually owned 4 brothels and multiple saloons across South Dakota and Montana, with documented operations in Deadwood, Lead, Sturgis, Belforche, Miles City, and Rapid City. She performed basic medical procedures, including midwifery, for women who had no other access to care. Her Rapid City operation survived prohibition by converting into a speakeasy. In 1928, she was sued for $10,500 by a Rapid City resident named Alice Olson. The jury awarded $3,000 against her. Her obituary, published in the Rapid City paper, described her as a noted social worker. The city that spent decades fining her, rating her, and morally condemning her wrote her a respectable eulogy when she was finally quiet enough to receive one. She probably would have found that funny. Fact 6. Martha Jane Burke, documented in history as Calamity Jane, was born in 1852 and died in 1903. She is one of the most mythologized figures of the American West. Dime novels, stage shows, films, an entire constructed identity built around a single woman's name. During periods of financial hardship in Deadwood, Calamity Jane worked as a maid and prostitute in one of Dora Dufran's establishments. The most famous female figure of the Wild West was an employee of a madam. Hollywood built an entire mythology around Calamity Jane, the independence, the frontier spirit, the refusal to be contained, and somehow never mentioned who signed her paycheck. Here is what the Western films absolutely refused to show you: the institution that employed the legend. Fact 5. Dora Dufran named her Belle Fourche establishment Diddlin' Dora's and advertised it with a tagline that would be remarkable in any era. 3 Ds, dining, drinking, and dancing, a place where you can bring your mother. The ability to write advertising copy that makes a brothel sound like a family destination is a specific and undervalued skill. When Prohibition arrived and the rules changed around her, Dufran did not close. She converted. The Rapid City location became a speakeasy, while continuing to operate its other functions. The sign changed. The building stayed open. The revenue continued. The greatest business skill on the frontier was not knowing how to open an establishment. It was knowing how to stay open when every force in the surrounding society was organized around shutting you down. Fact 4. Maddie Silks purchased her first Denver brothel on Holiday Street, later renamed Market Street, from a woman named Nellie French for $13,000. She operated houses on that block for 42 years. 42 consecutive years on the same street, through boom and bust, through political administrations that tried to shut her down, through the death of competitors, through the transformation of the city around her. In 1909, when Jenny Rogers died, Silks purchased the House of Mirrors, the 3-story, 27-room monument Rogers had built, and added it to her holdings. She did not just survive the frontier real estate market. On that particular block, in that particular city, for 4 decades, she was the frontier real estate market. Sound familiar? The business model never changed, just the address. Fact 3. In 1915, Denver's reform movement finally succeeded in shutting down the Holiday Street district. The red light operations were formally closed by municipal order. The reformers believed they had won. Maddie Silks looked at the same situation and saw a rebranding opportunity. She renamed her operation a hotel. The girls who had worked for her became maids on paper, listed in city records under an employment category that raised no flags. Same building, same address, same women, different sign. The reform movement had achieved a victory over the institution's name. The institution itself adapted in the time it takes to print new stationery. She did not survive the reform era by fighting it. She survived it by wearing its language like a coat she could take off when no one was looking. Fact 2. Maddie Silks married her accountant, Jack Reddy, at age 77. She died on January 7, 1929, at Denver General Hospital from a hip fracture. She was 82 or 83 years old. She had operated the most famous commercial establishments on the wickedest street in Denver for 42 years. She had outlasted every reform movement, every legal campaign, every competitor, and every sheriff who had ever tried to regulate her out of existence. She is buried at Fairmount Cemetery in Denver, not under the name Maddie Silks, not under the name that ran a 3-story establishment with gilt mirrors and velvet curtains, not under the name that disrupted city council meetings and recruited girls from the East Coast in annual marketing parades, under the name Martha A. Reddy. The gravestone does not mention a single word of what she built. Whether that erasure was chosen or imposed, the result is the same. Fact 1. Here is what actually happened on the American frontier. A group of women, operating without corporate backing, without legal protection, without social approval, and without any of the institutional frameworks that men use to accumulate and protect wealth, built the most sophisticated commercial operations in their towns. They constructed real estate portfolios. They maintained private security forces that functioned better than official law enforcement. They built political infrastructure that reached from the sheriff's office to the city council chamber. They developed brand strategy, employment contracts, crisis management systems, and marketing operations that would look recognizable to any modern business analyst. They were taxed when politicians needed revenue. They were fined when reformers needed victories. They were raided when newspapers needed stories. And they kept the doors open through all of it. The women built real power. The moment the frontier became regulated, when the rules were finally written down and the institutions formalized, the women who had been running the actual economy of those towns were quietly removed from the record. Their buildings stayed. Their names did not follow. The House of Mirrors stood on Market Street long after the name Jenny Rogers had been replaced by Leah Wood on a headstone in a cemetery. The old Homestead House in Cripple Creek still exists as a museum. Pearl de Vere's name appears on a small plaque. Maddie Silks ran operations for 42 years on a street that was eventually renamed and redeveloped over her history. The madam was never really about the saloon. She was about what happens when a society refuses to give a woman a legitimate path to power and then acts surprised when she builds her own, from the ground up, without asking permission, and without leaving a forwarding address. That story did not end in 1895. It just changed the sign on the door. Which of these women surprised you most? Drop her name in the comments. If you know someone who thinks they know the real history of the American West, send them this video, because almost everything they were taught left out the people who actually ran the place. If you want to know about another group of frontier women who built parallel power structures in plain sight and got written out of history just as completely, women who were operating in a different industry but using the exact same playbook, that story is coming next. The question is whether you can guess which industry before the video tells you.